A week later, the view from Minho's new office was not of stars, but of Seoul. Sunlight streamed through the glass, painting the busy city streets below in gold. The room was in a tall building, not buried in a mountain. It felt strange. The permanent bunker was still manned, but the center of gravity had shifted. Humanity was no longer just hiding, waiting for a threat. It was now engaged in the delicate, exhausting work of deciding what came next. On his desk, a sleek console displayed not battle maps, but star charts dotted with hundreds of new markers. Each one represented a signal, a plea, a request for contact. The sheer volume was staggering. Yuna had moved her operations here, and her team worked around the clock, sorting, translating, and categorizing. They were not just diplomats anymore. They were librarians of a galaxy in distress. A message from the Tula had been the tipping point. Minho's founding principle had been broadcast galaxy-wide. It was short and written with Yuna's careful skill. It stated that Earth would not govern, would not impose its will, and would not send armies. But it declared that Earth considered the wanton destruction of a species, the draining of a world, or the enslavement of a people to be the same kind of existential threat that had been aimed at them. It was a line in the sand, not a promise to fight every battle, but a clear statement that such acts were now seen and noted by the civilization with the precursor shield. The effect was not instantaneous peace, but it was a tremor. On dozens of worlds like Gelmer, the rogue assembly garrisons found their actions under a new, uncomfortable light. They weren't just squabbling over spoils in the dark anymore. They were being watched. Some retreated. Others, foolishly, tried to continue. Those were the ones where Yuna's team, with Ji-Woo's brilliant work on communications, would facilitate contact between the oppressed species and other nearby civilizations who smelled opportunity in the power vacuum. Minho's Earth was not playing chess, moving pieces. It was turning on a light in a room where bullies had operated in the dark for centuries. Hana had come down from orbit. She now worked in a lab beside Jay, who had also returned to Earth. Their task was different. They studied the dormant Guardian lattice, yes, but with a new goal. Could its principles, its ancient understanding of energy and reflection, be adapted? Not as weapons, but as tools? Could they, for instance, design a small-scale version to protect a water-rich asteroid from being strip-mined by a desperate, fleeing garrison? A defensive gift, knowledge shared freely. It was slow, painstaking work, but it felt right. They were learning from the shield, not exploiting it. Tay, from his Martian outpost, had become their early warning system. He tracked the movements of the larger, more powerful species who had survived the assembly's fall. They were quiet, observant, and deeply cautious. A few had sent carefully worded diplomatic overtures, testing the waters. These were handled by Yuna with extreme care. There was no grand alliance, no new council, just simple, clear communication channels being opened. The message was consistent. Peaceful coexistence is possible. Threaten others as you threatened us, and you will face not our armies, but your own consequences. One afternoon, Yuna entered Minho's office. She looked tired, but there was a light in her eyes that hadn't been there before. "We have a direct, secure channel with the Keldar hegemony," she said. Sub-Counselor Grix, the one who tried to give orders after the event, and Minho asked, gesturing for her to sit. "And he wants to talk. Not as a counselor. He says the hegemony is reassessing." They were high in the assembly, but not at the very top. They saw what happened. He says they are dismantling their occupation forces on 3 frontier worlds. He is asking, very formally, if Earth would be willing to observe the transition to ensure local stability. Minho leaned back in his chair. This was it. Not a surrender, not a challenge. A request for legitimacy. The Keldar were asking Earth to bless their withdrawal, to lend its new, fearsome moral authority to their attempt to be something other than oppressors. It was a cynical move, perhaps, but also a practical one. It was a step away from the old ways. We observe, Minho said after a moment. We send a small, unarmed diplomatic shuttle. We watch. We report back publicly that the Keldar are honoring the self-determination of those worlds. We give them a way to save face while doing the right thing. Yuna smiled, a real smile. That's the idea. It's messy. It's politics. But it's not war. That evening, Minho walked out onto a small balcony. The city lights were beginning to twinkle below, mirroring the first stars above. He thought about the last week. The fear was still there, a low hum in the background. The galaxy was a big, dangerous place. But something had shifted. They had not become heroes. They had become symbol. A stubborn, unyielding symbol of a simple idea. You do not get to destroy others because they are inconvenient. The Guardian had enforced that idea with brutal, final efficiency. Now, humanity had to live up to it, not with a shield, but with their actions. Jay and Hana were in their lab, trying to turn protection into a gift for others. Tay was watching the dark, ensuring they weren't blindsided. Ji Woo was listening to the voices of the galaxy small and forgotten, making sure they were heard. Yuna was building, word by careful word, a new language of conduct between stars. They were not a galactic council. They were a handful of tired people in offices and labs, doing the hard, boring work of building something better on the foundation of a terrible lesson they never wanted to teach. Minho looked up at the stars, no longer just points of light, but now homes, battlefields, hopes. The Galactic Assembly had been obliterated minutes after daring to threaten Earth. Its shadow was gone. What grew in its place would be complicated, difficult, and fragile. But for the first time since the countdown timer had appeared on his screen, Minho felt not just relief, but a faint, stubborn flicker of something like hope. They had defended their home. Now, perhaps, they could help others feel safe in theirs. The story was no longer about a threat. It was about what they chose to do with the silence that followed. And they had chosen to listen, to watch, and to begin. The first few hours after the event were a strange global mix of numbness and frantic energy. On the surface, life went on. People went to work, children went to school, but everyone moved like they were in a dream, their eyes constantly darting to the sky or to screens. The official announcements had been simple. A hostile alien threat had been neutralized by a secret planetary defense system. Earth was safe. The details were sparse, and that was by Minho's design. In the bunker, the immediate crisis was shifting into a new, complex phase. The initial shock had worn off, replaced by a grinding fatigue and the weight of what came next. Minho had not slept. He stood before a wall of screens, each showing a different piece of the puzzle. One displayed the quiet, expanding debris field that was once the heart of the Galactic Assembly. Another showed the scattered positions of the remaining alien vessels, still holding their distance like wary animals. A third streamed the chaotic babble of galactic communications, now being filtered and organized by Ji Woo and her team. Yuna approached him, carrying 2 cups of strong tea. She handed one to him. Her eyes were shadowed with exhaustion, but her mind was sharp. "The calls are starting," she said quietly. "What kind of calls?" Minho asked, taking the warm cup, "Not from the big players?" "Not yet. They're still in too much shock. These are from the smaller client species. The ones the Assembly managed." She used the word carefully, but they both knew what it meant. Controlled, dominated, exploited. She called up a log on a nearby screen. It was a list of incoming diplomatic hails, each tagged with a species identifier in a crude translation of intent. The verdant chorus of Keloth seeks clarification on the change in galactic authority. The mechanized guild of Gurzank inquires about trade possibilities. The free spores of Xylos requests asylum? Asylum? Minho's eyebrow raised. From what I can piece together, the assembly kept order through a system of quotas, resource tithes, and military garrisons. With the central command gone, the garrisons on some of these worlds are either deserting or going rogue. The Xylosians are a photosynthetic species. The assembly harvested their oldest great spores as a luxury good. It was controlled, systematic. Now, the local overseers are trying to grab what they can before everything collapses. They're scared. Minho sipped his tea, the bitterness mirroring his thoughts. Humanity had just defended itself. They had not asked to be the galaxy's police or its refuge. But a terrible power vacuum had been created, and they were now, unintentionally, at its center. By simply surviving, they had become the most powerful force in the local galactic neighborhood. We can't ignore them, Yuna said, reading his silence. If we do, the chaos will spread. It could lead to wars, genocides. And eventually, that chaos will find its way to our doorstep. If not with weapons, then with refugees, with pirates, with problems we can't even imagine. Minho knew she was right. He looked at the screen showing Earth, whole and blue. We are not conquerors. We are not the new assembly. No, Yuna agreed. But we can be a stable point, a reference. We can offer a new way, not through threats, but by example. By saying this is a line that cannot be crossed. We already drew that line for ourselves. Others might want to stand behind it. Her words made sense, but the responsibility was colossal. At that moment, Tay's voice came through from the Mars relay, more excited than they'd ever heard him. Commander, Ambassador Yuna, you need to see this. I've been tracking the vector of the backlash, the reflection. What about it? Minho asked. It was perfect. Too perfect. The Guardian didn't just shoot the energy back randomly. It calculated the exact origin point, not just the weapon, but the command nexus. It targeted the source of the hostile intent with pinpoint accuracy. But the energy signature, it didn't stop there. A cold trickle went down Minho's spine. What do you mean? The reflection pulse, after it obliterated the flagship, it kept going, at a diminished but still traceable level. It bounced off their central beacon and shot outwards, along the assembly's own subspace communication network, like a shockwave on a web. I'm detecting localized power failures, system reboots, and communication blackouts on over 200 listed assembly worlds and outposts. It didn't hurt them physically, but it shut them down. Temporarily, it was a system skill for their entire government network. The room fell silent. The ancient shield hadn't just defended. It had performed a surgical, galactic-scale counterstrike. It had silenced the very voice of the Empire that had threatened its charge. Jay's voice, thin with awe, joined the channel from the moon. It's a learning system. We thought it was a mirror. It's not. It's a judge. It analyzes the threat and delivers a proportional, systemic response. It didn't destroy their planets. It destroyed their ability to coordinate and attack. It cut the head off the snake and then temporarily paralyzed the body. This changed everything. Humanity wasn't just hiding behind an impenetrable wall. They were sitting in a fortress that could reach out and disarm an entire civilization with a touch. The sheer, elegant lethality of it was humbling and terrifying. Minho put his tea down, his hand steady but his mind reeling. This information does not leave this group, he said, his voice commanding absolute attention. To the galaxy, the Guardian is a shield, a reflective barrier. Nothing more. We do not understand its full capabilities, and we will not advertise them. Everyone voiced their agreement. The last thing they needed was for the terrified galaxy to see Earth not as a safe harbor, but as a new, unknowable terror. Ji-woo spoke up from her con station. "Sir, a new hail. It's different. It's on an old, simple frequency. Almost primitive. The translation is rough, but the video is clear." "Put it on screen 4, Minho said. The screen flickered. The image was grainy. It showed a being that looked vaguely amphibian, with large, dark eyes and smooth, gray skin. It stood in what looked like a crude metal room. Behind it, others of its kind huddled. The being spoke, and the translation software struggled before settling on a phrase. "To the humans of the safe world, we hear your words. You say you hold no hostility. We are the Tula of Ocean World Gelner. The assembly garrison here is fighting among itself for our remaining food stores. They will drain our seas and leave us to die. We have no weapons, we ask. We ask for witness. If you cannot help, please see us. Remember that we were here." The transmission ended, leaving a stark, painful silence in the bunker. It was not a demand. It was not a plea for an army. It was a request for humanity to be a witness to a possible atrocity. It was a moral appeal to the species that had just faced down annihilation and won. Yuna looked at Minho, her eyes glistening. This was the true consequence. This was the weight. Minho stared at the now dark screen. The Tula were not asking for the Guardian. They were asking for them, for their attention, for their voice. He turned from the screens, the fatigue in his bones chased away by a new, grim determination. "Ji-woo, send acknowledgement to the Tula. Tell them they are seen. Earth is witness. Then, get me the Global Defense Council." And Yuna start drafting a new kind of message. Not a military declaration, a founding principle. He walked to the center of the room, looking at each of his team. Yuna, the diplomat. The voices of Jay and Hana on the speakers, the scientists. Tae, the strategist. Ji-woo, the listener. "We didn't choose this," Minho said. "But it's here. We will not rule. But we will not hide. We will bear witness. And we will define for everyone to hear what it means to be safe in a galaxy that just learned what happens when you threaten our home. The work of building something new, in the echoing silence of the old order's destruction, had begun." The silence in the bunker stretched, thick and heavy. For a full minute, no one moved. The main screen had switched back to a passive starfield, serene and unchanging. It showed no hint of the cataclysm that had just happened near Jupiter. The only evidence was the frantic scrolling data on the smaller monitors, telling the story in cold numbers and fading energy traces. Minho was the first to break the stillness. He took a deep, shuddering breath, feeling the air hit his lungs like it was his first. His hands, which had been clenched into fists so tight his nails had left marks on his palms, slowly relaxed. He turned from the screen to look at Yuna. She was still staring, her face wet with tears, one hand pressed to her mouth. The professional diplomat was gone, replaced by a young woman who had just stared into the abyss and watched it vanish. "Report," Minho said, his voice rough. He cleared his throat. "Full status. Earth. The Guardian. Everything." His command snapped the room back to life. Junior officers began speaking into headsets, their voices hushed but urgent. Data streamed in from seismic monitors, atmospheric sensors, orbital platforms. Yuna wiped her face with her sleeves and turned to her own console, her fingers trembling only slightly as she called up the global communication networks. "No seismic activity beyond baseline," an officer said. "No atmospheric ignition. No thermal spikes. All clear." Lunar base reports the Guardian lattice is returning to standby. Another voice followed. Power draw decreasing. No structural stress detected on the planetary frame. Orbital station unity confirms. Confirms the destruction of the primary alien energy signatures at the firing coordinates. Debris field is expanding. No signs of secondary weapons or movement from remaining fleet elements. Minho absorbed it all. Earth was untouched. Not a single city was damaged. Not a single life was lost. It was a miracle, born from ancient, forgotten engineering. Then, Yuna's voice cut through the technical chatter. It was small, filled with a different kind of dread. Commander, the wider galactic channels. There, lighting up. She routed the audio to the main speakers. A cacophony of sounds poured into the room. It was not one voice, but hundreds, maybe thousands, overlapping. There were warbles, clicks, melodic chimes, and guttural roars. They were all speaking different languages, but the tone was universal. Panic, confusion, utter terror. They were the subspace frequencies used by the Galactic Assembly. Minutes ago, they would have been filled with orderly reports, administrative chatter, the boring hum of bureaucracy. Now, they were a screaming chorus of chaos. A fragment of clear translation scrolled across Yuna's screen, picked up by the linguistic A's. Assembly beacon is gone. All senior counselor signals terminated. Another fragment, the energy backlash. It came from the target. It shouldn't be possible. Another. Voice shrill. The primitive world, it has a reflex shield. A precursor reflex shield. Who gave it to them? The word precursor flashed on the screen multiple times. Minho filed it away. It was a clue to the Guardian's origin. Can you isolate anything coherent? Minho asked, walking to stand behind Yuna. She worked quickly, her training taking over. She filtered out the noise, searching for a dominant signal, a mayday, anything with structure. Finally, she locked onto one. It was a voice, trembling but trying for authority. The translation appeared in text below. To any remaining assembly vessels, this is Sub-Counselor Grix of the Keldar hegemony. The central authority is gone. The flagship, the council chamber, the entire first circle. Obliterated. The energy pulse was their own weapon, reflected. I repeat, the human world possesses a reflexive defense matrix of precursor origin. Do not, under any command, fire upon it. All vessels are to hold position. Await. Await new instructions. The message repeated, a desperate loop. They're leaderless, Yuna whispered, looking up at Minho. Their government, their military command. It was all in one place. And they just used it to shoot themselves. Minho felt no triumph. Only a cold, sinking understanding of the scale of what had just happened. The Galactic Assembly had not just lost a weapon. It had decapitated itself. The counselors, the admirals, the central mind of their civilization, all had been on that flagship or linked to it, confident in their superiority, ready to watch the extermination of a nuisance. They had been erased in the blink of an eye by their own arrogance. On the engineering station Unity, Hannah listened to the same chaos. The cold anger in her stomach had melted away, replaced by a hollow feeling. On her visual scan, the remaining alien ships, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, scattered further out in the solar system, were like startled insects. Their formations were breaking apart. Some were turning away. Others seemed frozen. None were advancing. They're scared, she said softly to Jay over their private line. On the moon, Jay watched the Earth schematic, the golden lattice now a soft, dormant glow. They saw a god wake up, he replied, his voice quiet with awe. They tried to step on an insect, and the mountain hit back. In the bunker, Minho knew the next decision was his. The immediate threat was over. But a power vacuum in a galaxy full of advanced species was a dangerous thing. He thought of wolves and wounded giants. "Open a channel," he said to Una. "Broadcast on all the assembly frequencies they're using. Earthwide frequency 2. It's time we spoke." Una nodded, setting it up. "Ready." Minho stood straight, facing the camera. He saw his own reflection in the dark glass, a tired man in a simple uniform, standing in a room under a mountain. He was about to address a galaxy in turmoil. "This is Commander Minho of Earth," he began, his voice steady and low. "The threat to our world has ended. We took no aggressive action. We fired no weapons. The force that destroyed the Galactic Assembly fleet was its own, turned back by a defensive system we did not build, but which protects our home." He paused, letting the translators across the galaxy catch up. "Earth is not a threat to the galaxy. We are a young species, eager to learn and to explore in peace. The ultimatum given to us was an act of unjust aggression. Its consequence was self-inflicted. We hold no hostility toward the remaining species of the Assembly, or any other peaceful civilization." He took another breath, his next words chosen with extreme care. "However, understand this. The defense of Earth is absolute. Any further act of aggression will meet the same automatic response. We do not seek conflict, but we will survive." He gave a slight nod to Una, who ended the transmission. The effect on the chaotic channels was instantaneous. The panic did not stop, but it changed. The screams of fear were now mixed with waves of disbelief, frantic analysis, and a new, pervasive note of sheer, unadulterated shock. The primitive humans were not celebrating. They were not issuing threats of conquest. They were stating a simple, terrifying fact: we are here. Do not attack us. And they had just proven they could make that stick dot in a quiet corner of the communication suite. A young specialist named Ji Woo had been monitoring everything. Her job was to catalog signal types, but now she was listening to the meaning. She heard a new pattern emerging from the chaos. It was not from the big, powerful species. It was from the edges, the fringes of the Assembly. Smaller, weaker civilizations who had been under the Assembly's thumb. One signal, faint but clear, was picked up by her focused array. It was a simple, repeating pulse. When she ran it through the translation matrix, it came out as a single word in a dozen different languages. A plea, a hope, freedom. She looked up, her eyes wide, and turned to see Minho and Una. She wasn't sure if they'd heard it yet. But she knew, in her heart, that everything had just changed forever. The galaxy's bullies were gone, and in their place, standing unharmed on a world wrapped in ancient armor, was humanity. And 100 enslaved species were now looking at them, wondering what came next. On the moon, inside a base carved into the crater Copernicus, Jay stared at his own set of screens. The data flowing in was not about mineralogy or lunar tectonics anymore. It was a cascade of power readings, deep and seismic, coming from the blue planet hanging in the black sky outside his viewport. He was a quiet man, more comfortable with rock samples than people, but his mind was sharp and understood systems. Right now, the system he was watching was waking up. The Guardian. They called it that because no one knew its real name. It had been found by accident. A deep Earth scan for geothermal energy sources had found a pattern that was not natural. It was a lattice, a vast and complex machine network fused with Earth's mantle and core. It was old, so impossibly old it made human history look like the blink of an eye. It was not of human making. It was a relic, a piece of someone else's history, buried in their own home. Jay's job, along with a team of the best minds on the planet, had been to try and understand it. They learned a few things. It was not a weapon. It drew a tiny, constant trickle of power from Earth's own geothermal heart. It was not of human design, but it was connected to the planet in a way that felt almost protective. After years of study, they found the core command. It was a single simple instruction, buried in code that was more like music than mathematics. It was a command to mirror, to reflect, to return any directed planet-level energy signature back to its source point of origin. A perfect automatic echo dot, it was a shield, not a sword. The ultimate defense. A final answer to a very specific, very terrible question. The scientists had debated what it meant. Who put it there? Why? Were they protecting Earth, or were they using Earth as a locked box for this dangerous technology? There were no answers. Only the machine, sleeping in the dark dot now. Jay was waking it up dot. His fingers flew across the console, inputting the authorization codes Minho had sent. He was not activating anything new. He was simply removing the dampeners, the careful blocks they had put in place to keep the ancient system idle. He was letting it do what it was built to do. A low thrum, more felt in the bones than heard, vibrated through the lunar base. The lights flickered for a second. On his screen, a schematic of Earth glowed. Deep within it, a golden web of light began to pulse, starting at the core and spreading outwards like a heartbeat reaching the skin. Jay? Status. The voice in his ear was Hannah's. She was in orbit. On the engineering station, Unity, her voice was calm, but he could hear the strain underneath. The lattice is active, Jay said, his own voice soft. It's singing. Power levels are nominal. It's drawing from the planetary core. No stress on the tectonic plates. It's stable. Good. Keep it that way. My scans show the energy buildup on their end is massive. It's not a weapon aimed yet. It's just a threat. A show of force. Do you think they'll really do it? Jay asked, looking at the image of Earth. It looked so fragile. Hannah was silent for a moment. She was an engineer. She believed in cause and effect, in actions and consequences. Yes, she said finally. They gave a 10-minute ultimatum to surrender our entire future. That is not the act of someone who bluffs. They will pull the trigger. They probably think they're doing the galaxy a favor. On the Unity, Hannah watched a different set of data. Her station had the best long-range sensors outside of the bunker. She could see the Galactic Assembly's fleet, or at least the energy signatures of it. They were holding position near Jupiter, a cluster of cold, precise lights. One signature, however, was growing brighter and hotter by the second. It was the focal point of a terrible energy. A planet cracker. The math was clear. It was more than enough to shatter Earth's crust and turn it into a cloud of burning debris. She thought of her brother, down in Bison. She thought of her friends. A cold anger settled in her stomach, replacing the fear. This was not a battle. This was an execution. And humanity was just supposed to kneel and accept it. Back in the bunker under Sol, the silence was a physical thing. The timer had hit 0:30 seconds ago. Minho and Yuna watched the main screen. The image of Counselor Valer was still there, unmoving, waiting for their surrender. They are not responding to our refusal, Yuna said. Her mouth was dry. They are just waiting. They are confirming their target, Minho said. His eyes were fixed on the sensor readouts. The energy spike from near Jupiter was flashing critical red on his screen. They are making sure the shot is perfect. A new voice came over the comms. It was Tay, the tactical officer stationed at a relay outpost on Mars. He was young, brilliant with coordinates and vectors. Commander, I have a confirmed firing solution locked from the alien fleet. It's a focused Takin beam, modulated for maximum crustal fragmentation. Impact in approximately 80 seconds from... Mark. Minho closed his eyes for a brief second. This was it. Acknowledged, Tay. All stations, This is it. Guardian is active. No evasive actions. No counterfire. We hold. He looked at Yuna. She looked back, her face pale but her jaw set. They had sent their defiant message. They had called the bluff, if it was a bluff. Now they would see. On the moon, Jay watched the golden lattice in the Earth's schematic brighten until it was almost white. The machine was not just active now. It was anticipatory. It sensed the incoming threat, a specific signature of destructive intent. It was preparing its one and only response dot in orbit. Hana watched the energy spike from the alien weapon reach its peak. On her screen, a line of light, theoretical but deadly, traced the path from Jupiter to Earth. Firing in 5, she said, her voice a flat monotone. 4, 3, 2, 1. In the bunker, the main viewer changed. Counselor Valer's image vanished. In its place was a real-time visual of space from a high-orbit satellite. For a half-second, nothing happened. Then, a point of light, brighter than a star, flared to life near Jupiter. A thin, impossibly straight beam of condensed destruction lanced out from it. It moved faster than light, a ripple in reality itself. It crossed the vast distance between planets in an instant. It struck Earth's atmosphere directly over the Pacific Ocean. Minho held his breath. Yuna's hand found his arm and gripped it tightly. The beam did not explode. It did not burn through. It hit the upper atmosphere and spread, not like a fire, but like a ripple in a pond. A shimmering golden wave erupted from the point of impact. It was beautiful and terrifying. It washed over the entire planet in the blink of an eye. A perfect, glowing shell of light. The Guardian had engaged. The beam's energy did not dissipate. It did not transfer into heat or force. The golden shell pulsed once, a deep, resonant thrum that was felt by every person on the planet as a gentle vibration in their bones. Then the energy of the beam, every joule of its destructive power, was gathered, folded, and inverted by the ancient lattice dot. In the same instant it was absorbed, it was released. Not outward, not randomly. It was sent back, along the exact same path it had come. A perfect mathematical reflection. On Hana's screen, the line of light reversed. It traced its way back to its source with unerring accuracy. Near Jupiter, the brilliant point of light that was the Galactic Assembly's weapon flared once, 100 times brighter than before. It was not firing. It was receiving. It was hit by the full planet-killing force of its own beam. The light expanded silently in the vacuum. A brief, tiny sun that consumed the firing station, the flagship, and every support vessel that had been powering the weapon. One moment they were there, a symbol of absolute power. The next, there was only an expanding cloud of superheated plasma and dust dot in the bunker. The main screen showed the Earth, still whole, still blue, the golden shimmer fading from its atmosphere. The silence returned, deeper than before. Minho slowly let out the breath he was holding. Yuna's grip on his arm loosened. Tay's voice came over the comm, hushed with awe and horror. Commander, the alien fleet's primary energy signatures, they're gone. The weapon source is gone. It just vanished. Minho nodded, a slow, heavy movement. He looked at Yuna. They destroyed themselves, he whispered. She nodded, tears finally spilling from her eyes, not of joy, but of sheer, overwhelming relief and shock. With their own arrogance. The first part was over. Earth was safe. But as Minho looked at the screen, now showing the quiet stars where a fleet had been, he knew nothing would ever be the same. The echo of their threat had just finished ringing across the galaxy. And now, the silence that followed was theirs to fill. The room was silent except for the low hum of machines. The air was cool and carried a faint smell of ozone and recycled air. Minho stood at the central console, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. On the large screen before him, stars drifted slowly in the blackness of space. It was supposed to be a quiet shift, a routine monitoring session. His second, a young woman named Yuna, was reviewing a data stream from the outer solar system, her fingers tapping lightly on her own terminal. Their workplace was buried, deep under the mountains near Seoul. It was called the Planetary Coordination Hub, but everyone just called it the bunker. Its job was simple: watch the sky and listen. For decades, Earth had listened, hearing only the vast and empty silence of space. Then, 5 years ago, the silence broke. First came the strange, patterned signals from the direction of a star called Gliese 581. Then, confirmed images of sleek, non-human vessels skirting the edges of the Kuiper Belt. They never made contact. They just watched. Humanity's response had been a frantic, unified scramble. A global fleet was built, not for war, but for exploration and, hopefully, dialogue. Ships with names like Uns Daedalus and Uns Pioneer now charted the asteroid belt. The mood on Earth was a nervous mix of fear and wonder. Minho, a career officer with calm eyes and a patience that seemed carved from stone, was chosen to command the bunker's watch. Yuna, sharp and intuitive, was their best linguist and diplomat in training. Yuna's tapping stopped. The sound cut off so completely that Minho turned to look at her. Her face, usually animated, had gone very still. Her eyes were wide, fixed on her screen. "Commander," she said. Her voice was a dry whisper. "Incoming priority transmission. Point of origin is indeterminate. It's bypassing all our standard buffers. It's just appearing." Minho was at her shoulder in 3 strides. On her screen was not the usual stream of numbers or vague sensor ghosts. It was a clear video feed. The being that looked back at them was like nothing from Earth. Its form appeared crystalline, multifaceted, catching the light of an unseen source. It had no mouth, but when it spoke, a smooth, synthesized voice filled the room, speaking in perfectly accented Korean. "People of Earth, I am Counselor Vylar of the Galactic Assembly of Ordered Species." Minho felt a cold knot form in his stomach. This was it. First contact. For 5 of your solar cycles, this assembly has observed your species' accelerated expansion into the galactic commons. Your technology is primitive, your social structures chaotic and fragmented. Your sudden forays beyond your home gravity, well, are deemed disruptive. You scatter probes and vessels with no regard for cosmic etiquette or established spatial boundaries. The words were not friendly. They were a lecture, a scolding. Yuna's hand hovered over her recorder, her knuckles white. The Galactic Assembly maintains order and harmony across 10,000 star systems. Counselor Vylar continued, its crystalline facets shimmering. Your unchecked growth poses a statistical risk to this order. Therefore, you are hereby issued a decree of compliance. An official document, written in stark, simple text, overlaid the image. Minho's eyes scanned the lines. His breath caught. It demanded the immediate recall of all human vessels beyond the orbit of Mars. It demanded the permanent dismantling of all deep space-capable shipyards. It demanded that Earth submit to a guardianship under the Assembly, effectively surrendering its sovereignty. The list went on, each point more severe than the last dot. Then came the final line. Full and unconditional acceptance of these terms must be transmitted via this channel within 10 of your minutes. Failure to comply, or any attempt at hostile response, will be met with immediate and total planetary obliteration. The force required to fracture your world is already targeted and primed. You have until the mark. A countdown timer appeared in the corner of the main view screen. It began to tick down from 10 o'clock, 9:59, 9:58. The silence in the bunker was now absolute and heavy. The hum of the machines sounded like a scream. Yuna turned to Minho, her professional composure cracking, revealing the raw terror underneath. They can't be serious. Planetary obliteration? This is a first contact. Minho said nothing for a long moment. He stared at the crystalline face of Counselor Vilaire, which now stared blankly ahead, waiting. The threat was not delivered with rage or malice. It was delivered with the cold, administrative certainty of someone throwing away a piece of trash. That was what chilled Minho the most. Earth was not an enemy. It was a nuisance. A stain on their ordered galaxy, to be wiped clean with no more thought than someone washing a dish. He reached for the global comlink. This is Commander Minho at Sol PHE. We have a confirmed hostile first contact. A threat of planetary destruction has been issued. 10-minute deadline. I am activating the Omega Protocol. Repeat Omega Protocol. Connect me to the Global Defense Council. Now. Across the world, in other bunkers and offices, alarms that had never sounded before began to wail. In a command center in Geneva, faces appeared on screens, pale and shocked. In a research facility on the moon, a scientist named Jay was jolted from his work on mineral samples. In an engineering bay orbiting Earth, an engineer named Hana looked up from a reactor schematic as her screen flashed red. Minho's face was a mask of grim control as he addressed the gathered leaders. He laid out the terms. He showed them the timer. 7:12, 7:11. Panicked voices erupted from the speaker. We have to negotiate. We must recall the fleet. Show goodwill. We can't possibly fight this. Minho waited for the wave of fear to crest. Negotiate with what? He asked, his voice low but cutting through the noise. They did not ask for a negotiation. They issued a decree. They have given us 10 minutes to surrender our species' future or die. This is not a conversation. What is the Omega Protocol? The French representative asked, voice trembling. Contingency for an existential threat, Minho stated. It transfers all military and diplomatic authority to this station for the duration of the crisis. My authority. And my first assessment is that submission means the end of human autonomy forever. We would be a slave species in a cage of our own planet. And your alternative? The American president asked, her image grim. We have the Guardian. Minho said. A new silence, this one filled with a different kind of tension, fell over the conference line. The Guardian was the best-kept secret in human history. A discovery made not in space, but deep in Earth's own mantle. An ancient, incomprehensible machine network woven into the planet's very core. It was not a weapon. Its purpose, as best as scientists like Jay could guess, was protection. A last resort. It had one function, to reflect. To send back exactly what was received, that it had never been tested. It might not work, but it was all they had. Activating it is an act of war, the Russian chairman said. My NHO finally looked away from the leaders and back to the timer. 4:33. He looked at Yuna, who gave him a small, terrified, but decisive nod. No, Minho said, turning back to the screen. His voice was final. Firing a planet-killing beam at us is an act of war. Turning on a shield is not. They have threatened to obliterate us. We will not fire a single shot. But we will not yield. I am authorizing the full activation of the Guardian network. On my mark. He muted the global feed and turned to Yuna. The countdown glowed between them. 3 o'clock. Send our reply, he said. Yuna, her hands now steady with a terrible purpose. Open the return channel to the Galactic Assembly. She looked into the camera, her dark eyes holding a storm of fear and defiance. Message to the Galactic Assembly. This is Ambassador Yuna of Earth. We have received your ultimatum. We find your terms unacceptable. We are a peaceful species, but we will not surrender our freedom or our future. We will defend our home. Any act of aggression against Earth will be considered a declaration of war. The consequences will be yours to bear. She ended the transmission. The only reply was the silent, crystalline stare of Counselor Valair, and the timer continuing its relentless march. 2:15, 2:14. Minho opened a private line to the lunar base. Jay, Hannah, it's time. Bring the Guardian online. Full power to the planetary lattice. No active targeting. Set to full autonomous reflective response. The acknowledgments came back, tight with tension. Acknowledged. Powering sequence initiated. The machines buried in Earth's heart began to awaken. 100. In the bunker, Minho and Yuna stood side by side, watching the stars on the main screen. They did not speak. There was nothing left to say. They had chosen. They would stand, and they would see what the dawn brought. The final seconds bled away. 0 o'clock. The timer hit 0.